Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. Big week. Too many issues to talk about, so we're going to do the opinion maker panel for the whole show. Starting with Mark Dalton, friend of the show. Welcome back, sir.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
J.P. Johnson, new candidate for State House, correct?
Yes, sir.
What district?
79th District.
Where at?
79th District in the city of St. Louis.
Which neighborhood is that?
You got plenty of wards. 3rd Ward, 4th Ward, 5th Ward, 17, 19.
Where's that in relation to the ballpark?
I do not have the ballpark. That is the 78th. That's Bruce Franks. But close enough, downtown West. I got Union Station. Come on by when we get our aquarium.
Folks and all that. Representative Phil Crispinelli, friend of the show, St. Charles County. Welcome back, sir.
Glad to be here.
Greg Keller, best hair in the Republican Party, Republican strategist known far and wide. You were at the president's visit to Missouri this past week. What happened and what was the room like?
Huge turnout, fantastic event, right on the heels of Josh Hawley's statewide announcement, statewide tour for Missouri for Senate running against Claire McCaskill. They raised over $2 million for Hawley's campaign. That's going to go a long way towards closing that financial gap that he has right now with Claire McCaskill. Really good event. I thought Josh gave a very good speech. The president was very passionate about how important it is to have another vote in the Senate for his agenda. I
read a quote in one of the many papers you're quoted in that says this race won't hurt for money.
No. Anytime anyone runs for Senate in Missouri in a targeted race, there's going to be plenty of money. I think Josh has already proven himself to be a tremendous fundraiser. Claire, obviously, $9 million in the bank already. No one's going to be hurting for dough in this race.
Phil Crispinelli, to me, Josh Hawley, any question you had about where the president was, who was the favorite, who was the presumed guy that had every chance to win this race, the president of the United States coming here, putting his stamp of approval on, clears that up, right?
Absolutely. When he came to St. Charles a few months ago, he endorsed Josh Hawley, and now he's delivering on his promise to help get him elected.
So what does this look like? I mean, Josh Hawley at the top of the ticket, going to have the money. Does he have the ability to motivate Republicans and turn them out?
I think Republicans understand that we have to keep the Senate in order to deliver on the promises that Trump made in his first election. So I think we're going to turn out, and I think we're going to flip that seat.
J.B. Johnson, you'll have an August race. That's the real race, your Democrat primary. But in November, can you turn those people back out, and will they be excited to be there? And does Josh Hawley inspire some sort of fear or reverberation, or is this going to be about Donald Trump?
Well, see, that's the question. Can Josh actually inspire people to come out to vote for him? I haven't seen that yet. Clearly, the race hasn't ramped up yet. Claire's a professional at this. She knows what she's doing. She clearly has the money in the bank. She seems to be keen on and having a knack for drawing candidates that can't muster up the sort of inspiration or can't mitigate the mistakes that you need to make if you're going to beat somebody experienced in a season as her. So I'm not certain, but it's a lot of race to go.
So Claire McCaskill, running for U.S. Senate. Now, Carpenters Union, a lot of the carpenters voted for Trump. I mean, the numbers show they had to have done that.
True.
Do they switch back and vote for Claire McCaskill?
Yeah, I think our members have, throughout history, they skip both sides down the ballot. You know, they vote what's best for their paychecks, and Claire has been, a proven leader on some labor issues, and that's one where they're not going to have a problem switching back and forth.
J.B. Johnson, speaking of the U.S. Senate race, the president came here for Josh Hawley, ended up not inviting statewide people with him. The Hawley campaign comes out and says this race will not be decided about, it'll be decided on what happened on the Senate floor, not Eric Greitens' bedroom. It looks like they're running as fast and as far away as they can.
Certainly. I mean, do you blame them? I think Josh has a couple things to worry about. One, the Confide investigation, so whether or not people take him serious in terms of quitting himself and doing his job. Secondarily, the Eric Greitens trial is going to happen, May 14th, so that's going to take up a lot of oxygen. And then
probably all the oxygen.
Probably all the oxygen, right? And then the third thing that you have to think about is Josh has to separate himself from all the noise that you're hearing and really make himself stand out as someone who promised not to be a career politician and run for the next race, and then immediately after winning his race, a year later, then he decided to run. So he has a lot of things that he has to focus on top of the fact that you have some propositions that will increase Democratic turnout. And if you look at the races around the nation, let's just look at Connor Lamb, for example, I think Democratic enthusiasm is going to be up. So, Josh, it's an uphill battle.
Representative, you tell me, I mean, some of these things may get moved to August. You may have a say in that in the coming weeks. But obviously, can Josh Hawley separate himself far enough from the governor where it's not a distraction?
You know, that's always going to be playing out in the background, but I think the people are going to judge Josh Hawley and Claire McCaskill based on their policy positions, not what's happening in Jefferson City. And so I'm confident that Josh can run out and run on the issues and win on the issues, because the people in Missouri are ready for conservative leadership, not only in Jefferson City but also in Washington.
We're a state, though, that elected a Kit Bond. We've elected guys that have Josh Hawley on the campaign trail. I mean, when you're the top of the ticket, you don't have a chance to be on the top of the ticket till you are. It's nothing you can really prepare for. Does he have the ability to turn folks on, motivate them, get them fired up?
I think he already did that. He did that in the Attorney General's race, and he won in a competitive primary, and then he won in the general election. And I think he's going to do it again in November of this year.
Greg Keller, Josh Hawley's running awful hard away from Eric Greitens, but can you get out of the shadow of this? With the Confide thing, maybe not his best day. He has another investigation going on. I think maybe the investigations give him a reason to officially stay far out. Plus, I mean, it's very hard for Claire McCaskill to attack Josh Hawley right now because no one's paying attention.
Yeah, I mean, let's not forget that he has a perfectly good excuse for not coming out too much and talking about the ongoing investigation. He's pretty much prevented from doing so, given the fact that technically the governor of Missouri is a client of his and it is an ongoing investigation. I think that's a perfect excuse. Let's also not forget what the larger political realities here are. Okay, this is a state that Donald Trump won by 19 points. This is a state where the President of the United States, Donald Trump, maintains favorable ratings of greater than 50%. Claire McCaskill has voted with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer 90% of the time. She voted against the tax cuts that have now led to 50,000 Missouri families getting bonuses from tax reform, not to mention the fact that 90% of Americans are benefiting from tax reform over a longer period of time. I think the larger problem for Claire McCaskill, if you look at her numbers, they are not good. She has been stuck in the low 40s for some time. There has been not a single poll that has showed her breaking out of the mid 40s. I think Missourians have finally figured out about Claire McCaskill. This is someone who says something folksy when she's back home in Missouri and then votes down the line liberal like Chuck Schumer tells her to in Washington, D.C.
But even you, as a guy that respects politics, good campaigner.
Great campaigner. But it's all predicated upon her pretending to be something that she isn't.
Mardal, and I do think this. You could sit down and have dinner with Claire McCaskill. She can talk hogs, dogs, and logs with anybody. She seems confident in what she says. She knows what she thinks. I think she's a person very comfortable in her own skin. And I get the situation where people can criticize her voting record or what she does, but I think she has a decent brand of being that moderate amongst Missourians.
No, she definitely has. I mean, that's why leadership among the Democratic Party have been targeting her recently for not towing the party line. She has done what's best for the majority of Missourians, and sometimes that's not popular with the Democratic Party, and some of them call her out on it, and but that's her doing what is best for majority of Missourians, not just for the Democratic Party.
So we do see, last thing on this, you do see these races. Jefferson County, a seat flipped. You saw a seat in Pennsylvania. Going through, I mean, it obviously is going to be a better year than it has been for Missouri Democrats. Is it enough to get her through?
No, definitely. I think so. I mean, you talk about, Trump winning by such a large margin, but what you didn't mention is that, Blunt won by 3 points. The governor won by a handful of points, 5 points. I mean, Trump wasn't carrying as much. I mean, he carried the Republicans across the finish line, but there was a lot of drop-off there.
Trump's a very unique guy. Yep. Let's talk about an issue that's talked about in the state legislature and this week in the House of Senate, prevailing wage, something you know a lot about.
Sure.
What's a prevailing wage?
So prevailing wage is just a minimum wage for construction work. It is calculated county by county based on contractors reporting what they pay their workers. So it maintains a standard of living and a standard wage for each area. So a program that was implemented by Republicans a long time ago actually keeps the local workers working on those jobs at the pay rates and keeps out-of-state contractors coming in and undercutting.
Phil Crispinelli, you were part of the majority that voted to repeal the law. What was the reason for that?
Well, what it actually is it's a price floor, and it's a price floor that transfers money from taxpayers to special interest groups that have a lot of power in Jefferson City. And so what we did is that we said to our taxpayers back home, we're going to get you 30% more schools, we're going to get you 30% more roads, we're going to get you 30% more buildings. And that's what they want to see. They want to see the best product for the lowest price, and we're going to have free market competition in this state that allows our businesses and our workers to compete to deliver the products that our
That
folks
30%
need.
though is not across the whole state, right? I mean, it may be 40% even in like Reynolds County, but in your district, I mean, the wage is higher,
It
right?
is.
So it's closer to that prevailing wage. Do you see the end result being a compromise?
It could be that in order to get this bill through the Senate, they need to make some accommodations that help rural Missouri address the very narrow issue they have where they're paying way higher than the rest of the state for their schools and their roads. But my hope is that we proceed with a full repeal and deliver on the promise that we made when we initially ran.
Greg Kelly, these are the kind of issues Republicans deal with. It is different between urban and rural Republicans. There's suburban and rural Republicans. Is this kind of thing they can compromise on?
We'll see. I mean, I think one of the things that's most important is that we get government sector union reform attached to prevailing wage. There's been a lot of talk in Jefferson City about starting to rein in the public sector unions. If we don't do something about that, it really runs the risk of putting this state in a financial hole that we may never get out of.
They could do that right now if you exempted cops and firefighters, right?
I think that's something people are talking about. I think it's important to realize that this is a good thing for police officers, giving them the right to know how their dollars are being spent by their union leadership, having an opportunity to vote every 2 years on these elections. These are good things. Do I think that we should be exempting our first responders out of such a great opportunity? I don't think so, but I know that there are people who are talking about that.
J.P. Johnson, you're looking to join that Democrat caucus. You're hearing these issues talked about. You're like, come on, Greitens, stay in office, stick around, right?
So I won't say there are folks rooting for Greitens to stay in office, and I certainly won't say that folks are rooting against that. I think people are at a standstill.
Care about prevailing wage ain't a bad thing for you.
Well, here's the thing. He signed right to work, and then, you know, we got our guys and gals on the line to go out there, get those votes, and ensure that we can stay that policy, and then we're going to overturn that in November. And I think this is the next step, right? We can't get right to work, so we'll go ahead and we'll try to take away prevailing wage. I think cops and firefighters care about Prop P in the city of St. Louis and the county, and us actually giving them a pay raise as opposed to whatever kabuki theater this is.
Give me a quick prediction. When is the right to work vote, August or November?
I think it'll be moved to August.
When is it going to be?
August.
August.
You, the guy that actually know.
I think November. So.
November.
Yeah.
Let's talk tax cuts real quick. Elijah Haar has a tax cut plan moving forward in the House. What's in it?
Yeah, we just heard it in Ways and Means Committee and passed it out 6-3. It just went through Rules Committee as well. What it is, it's a tax cut for working families. So it lowers our business tax to 5%. It lowers our individual tax to 5%. So no move in your tax status to get a lower rate. Everybody's going to pay 5%. It pays for it. It's revenue neutral, and it gets rid of the federal deduction.
Truly revenue neutral, you believe that?
I believe it's revenue
We're
neutral.
going to clip this tape, come back in 2 years, it's revenue neutral.
I believe it's revenue neutral.
Greg Keller, can you cut taxes when you're cutting the budget at the same time? I mean, normally states don't do that. They wait till they're flush.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's imperative that we get this passed. I mean, I think it's amazing that Democrats here in Missouri, of course, all they can say is Kansas, Kansas, Kansas. They kind of, have Tourette syndrome on what happened with Kansas.
Fair. I'm a big tax guy. Kansas did walk it back.
But what you'll never hear them talk about is what Donald Trump's tax reform is doing for the American economy right now. And Republicans and Democrats alike know that it's been fantastic for the American economy and is going to power us for years to come. Yet they're opposing the same kind of reform here in Missouri.
J.P. Johnson, the federal government can run a debt the state government can do.
Absolutely. The federal government can print money in Kansas, Kansas, Kansas. I mean, I don't think you can just ignore that, number one. Number two, Donald Trump's tax plan, just went through a month ago? And so we're saying it's so fantastic for the American economy. The American economy is $17 trillion. We don't know what effect this is going to have a year, 2 years from now. I will say people getting more money up front right now is a good thing, but watch what they're doing when they put their hand behind your back. Somebody's going to have to pay for this.
Mark Dalton, do they cut taxes when they're having to cut the budget at the same time?
I think it's going to be tough. I mean, we've got a tax cut that was passed by the legislature a couple of years ago. We still haven't seen the full effects of that. The federal government cutting budget. I mean, I love more money on the paycheck, but at some point you can only cut so much before we're going to have to cut other things.
No tax cut this year? No. Tax cut this year? Did they pass tax cut this year?
God willing.
Actually pass one?
We're going to get a tax cut.
I'm going to say they don't. And we'll be right back to argue about this and all sorts of things with our opinion maker. Brandon's going to stick around after this.
In 2008, Republic Services acquired the Bridgeton landfill in a merger. Since then, we've invested $200 million to clean up the site and to maintain environmental compliance. We do that while staffing the facility 24/7. That's because we support permanent solutions that are safe for our neighbors and clean up the environment. We're committed to doing what's right. That's what drives us every day. We're a part of the community, and we are here for the long haul. Republic Services. We'll handle it from here.
My name is Eric Philippi. I'm a veteran, a carpenter, and a father. When Eric Greitens said he was going to change politics as usual, folks like me didn't think the first thing he'd do as governor was take dead aim at our jobs and our families' livelihoods by working to repeal prevailing wage. Call Governor Greitens. Tell him to protect prevailing wage and to protect my family, not destroy it.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
At Ameren, Missouri, we know what light can do. It draws people together and chases monsters away. And if you shine it in the right direction, it will light the path for the next generation, showing them what their tomorrow could look like, and spotlighting the possibilities that lay in front of them. Investing in our community by lighting the way forward. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to This Week in Missouri Politics. During the break, we've been getting schooled by JP. We're going to continue that right now. Mark Dalton, the governor, looks like he may testify before the House committee, or at least be invited in the coming week. Rumors are you take the Fifth. What do you do? If the governor of the state of Missouri takes the Fifth Amendment to avoid incriminating himself under Missouri laws, should he still be the governor?
No, I think he's done a lot of things that have given reason for him not to be the governor still, but I don't put it past him to do that. I mean, he hasn't. I mean, a guy so good at pull-ups has a high bar for humiliation. And I don't see him stopping now.
He obviously hasn't been listening to his lawyers or lobbyists.
Not at all, and I do like the pun. Look, I'll say this, I'm a rights guy, and I'm about more rights, more enfranchisement. I don't think a sitting governor exercising his Fifth Amendment right should preclude him from serving. Now, there are a whole host of other things, like Mark said, that might be precluding him from being able to serve, particularly pissing off his Republican colleagues every chance he gets, and which is probably why he finds himself without many friends right now.
Corrupt, right?
Apparently, ostensibly so. But I will say, I want more individuals to have rights and not be blind if they actually allow themselves to activate their civil rights.
Greg Keller, Jay Nixon start taking the Fifth Amendment, there'd be just shock and outrage, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one more problem that this governor is dealing with amongst many. I think we would probably all agree that he's very unlikely, given his personality and his background as an individual, to actually step down. I think most people think he's probably going to have to be forced out.
Well, I think you'd have to have some, maybe a different level of concern for the state. Maybe that just comes from not being a part of state government that makes you not have that careful. But I think he's probably right. If this governor leaves, it'll be because Mike Keogh and Todd Richardson just force him out, correct?
Well, I think that's a possibility, but in the House we formed an investigatory committee to actually look at what the facts are in this situation, and I have every confidence in their ability to get to the bottom of anything that occurred, and we're going to base our decision off of facts and not media speculation.
I think the governor deserves the right to appear before the committee, correct?
Absolutely.
If he starts doing a Fifth Amendment thing, though, I think some Republicans will have to get a little. That's not what you want to see from your governor, right?
It certainly doesn't look good, but you know, the purpose of the Fifth Amendment says that the government cannot compel you to testify against yourself, and that's an enshrined constitutional right.
Mark Dalton, he's the government. he is they now. Let's talk about the issue that came before. It's pretty widely discussed now. This committee is looking into an assault allegation. Mm-hmm. You know, there's some Republicans that have found ways to make excuses and different things to stay on board, but I mean, domestic violence is a whole other situation.
Yeah, I think it adds another layer. I mean, initially it was an extramarital affair that he and his wife had dealt with. I say years ago. I mean, it was very recently. But and then it turned into, you know, blackmail and some other things. And then I think the domestic abuse thing is another layer that adds on top of it. And every time a layer gets on, I mean, the weight gets heavier to, you know, uphill climb for him, for sure, with the more that piles on.
Greg Keller, if there is an assault allegation that's actually corroborated, I mean, I think most Republicans, I mean, I don't know how folks were raised in other parts of the state, but in the Boot Hill, you don't hit women.
Yeah, I mean, that's potentially a real game changer. And that's really not even to speak about some of the other things that are coming down when you talk about the Missouri Ethics Commission, what they've been looking into, the use of the donor list from the Mission Continues. Supposedly the feds are looking into that now. This is a whole host of problems, but if domestic abuse is credibly charged and someone is under oath saying that occurred, that's a game changer.
J.B. Johnson, I think it starts to become even some of the women's groups that haven't been that vocal thus far. If you don't speak out in that situation, then you probably shouldn't be a group at all, right?
Well, certainly, abuse of any kind is wrong, domestic or otherwise. I will say this, and I think the conversation, I don't like the fact that this is being adjudicated in the media for this particular reason. The woman in question never consented to having any of this information out there. She never consented to, having her name and her children out there. And I do think there's a level of unfairness that she didn't get a choice in this. Her agency has been stripped away, and I think you have heard women's groups say, hey, wait a minute, regardless of what might have happened with the extramarital affair and whatever rumors are bandied about, she never had a say in this.
JP tells us some Democrats don't want him to stick around.
Well, I will say this. The federal investigation, some of the other things that you can absolutely look at that are material and that are meritorious, certainly you can go at that.
Let's talk about some of the things that could impact the legislature. The Ethics Commission now, by the time folks watch this, won't have a quorum. Whatever you think of the Ethics Commission, I think they do the best job they can do. Basically, it's like Houdini. They take the Ethics Commission, they chain them up, lock their hands, blindfold them and dump them in the river and say, hey, figure it out. The report that was produced, I understand why they did it. There was a honeymoon of a governor, a popular governor coming in. Right. The report, though, no one bought that at the time, but it's probably all they could do. Is it not time to take this situation to reform the Ethics Commission?
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of things have come to light here that the governor ran on a platform of, cleaning up corruption. Josh Hawley ran on cleaning up Jefferson City. Everybody talks a big game about wanting to clean things up, and things have just gotten murkier. So I think right now is a good time to really lay some groundwork for some new changes.
Greg Hiller, Ethics Commission doesn't need to have full cops and all this stuff, but this obviously didn't produce a result. There's things coming out now that prove that their report was incorrect.
Well, let's see how the process works out, because remember, you have the IRS who is potentially involved in some of these C3 and C4 issues. You have obviously the FEC who's going to be involved, potentially coming in from the federal level. I think it's entirely possible that when this is all said and done, we realize that in fact it is the Missouri Ethics Commission and the reports that they did that became kind of the tripwire, the fodder that got those other entities involved. So before we start saying, oh, let's fund a whole big new government bureaucracy, let's see how this plays out.
Maybe you already have a bureaucracy. Maybe you give it power to find the facts. So it's not the one starting it. Maybe they're the ones that actually get to the truth. Right.
The people of Missouri deserve a functional and effective Missouri Ethics Commission, and we do not have one right now. It's underfunded and it is understaffed, and we need to reform the system.
Let me ask you, you may get to vote on Senator Romine's bill. The legislative branch has a role in confirmations, theoretically. Now you are faced, I don't know about a constitutional crisis, may seem pretty heavy, but there is certainly a problem. Do you think his bill has merit that the legislature should have the confirmation power before they begin voting on these commissions?
Well, I have not reviewed Senator Romine's bill, but I will say this. There is a role, when Missouri's legislature is only here from January to May, there is a role for the governor to appoint people outside of that time. What decisions they can make in the interim, I think, are up for discussion, but ultimately I would not like to see anything that gets rid of the governor's ability to fill those boards when we're not around.
But if you're the legislative branch, you see a governor come in and just blow things up, if that's what the commissioners want to do. But I think you saw, like with Desi, he would appoint someone agreeing and promising to do the firing. They would see the facts and they'd flip and had to redo it. That to me is appointing people 1 minute before a meeting looks as shady and produces the results that you would expect.
I would think and hope that people on both sides of the aisle could agree that the current situation is untenable, which is that they don't have a quorum at the Missouri Ethics Commission. The governor is credibly charged with things in front of the Missouri Ethics Commission. All he needs to do for them to not adjudicate on his cases one way or the other is to not appoint anyone. That's just not a situation that we can really afford to maintain.
Now, Democrats have a little bit to do with this, though. Jay Nixon left some of these things open, and it was always, you had a guy on an unexpired term, you could pull him whenever he didn't vote your way. If Jay Nixon would have filled the spots, you wouldn't have the problems at MHDC. You wouldn't have the problems at Desi. There were some of these things that governors, maybe on the governor's end too, you should have filled the appointments.
Well, certainly, and as someone who worked in Mayor Slade's office and was responsible for making appointments, you want the regulatory function of government. You want to have those spots filled because you want to be able to have people to be able to do the jobs that they're chartered to do. Now, I will say this. I think we need to get to see all the facts. We need to diagnose everything. We shouldn't just go haphazard and change things. One. Two, I do think the governor should have the right to be able to fill these positions, whatever governor. I think we shouldn't be so specific.
With no confirmation.
With no confirmation. I think we should empower. Look, I worked in a weak mayor system, and the only reason it was strong was
we'll
because.
Have to switch seats with JB. He may look up. He may be said by Phil in the legislature.
What's up?
But what do you think? I mean, if you just cut under this theory, you just pretty much take the Senate out of it, right? Mm-hmm. There's really no confirmation needed. You just blow the things up and you walk off.
Yeah, and I think it relates back to the system we had with the school situation we had earlier this year. I mean, it creates a lot of ability to exploit the system as it is.
Greg Cutler, you're somebody that knows about tort reform. Really briefly, while we have you here, what's Missouri need to do to change the tort situation? Give me two things.
Geez, I think they're moving forward pretty aggressively now. A couple bills that they're looking at have to do with seatbelts. Another has to do with merchandising practices. I think another one is the statute of repose. I think those are the ones that are getting the most serious look. I think they're going to have a serious challenge getting any of that through the Missouri Senate the way that it's currently constituted, however. I think you're seeing signals from a lot of people that they're just, and already have stopped business altogether there, and I don't know if that's going to change.
That pass?
Well, I think you forgot an important one. This week in the House, we passed venue, which I think is the most important tort reform measure we can take up right now. Out-of-state trial attorneys are finding any reason in the world to bring their lawsuits.
Can you get that to the Senate?
I believe so. It's that important.
Mark Dahlman with a minute left, who won the week?
I would say Eric Greitens won the week. He made it through another week without another indictment, impeachment, or resignation.
Bars changed. Who won the week?
I think Jay Barnes won the week. What I like about Jay is that not only is he intelligent, but he knows how to work a room. He knows how to speak eloquently to anybody and everybody that's there. He treats them with respect and he's fair.
He's in the most stressful, worst position you could be in, and everybody has confidence in him.
And he's as cool as a cucumber.
Who won the week?
Josh Hawley, great roll-up for Missouri Senate, raised $2 million. Campaign with the president, who remains incredibly popular here in the state, and he's correctly diagnosed Claire McCaskill as a two-faced politician who says one thing in D.C., does another thing in Missouri.
You've diagnosed her. Who won the week?
The Missouri House, especially Speaker Todd Richardson and our floor leader Rob Vescovo, they've moved 160 bills through the House.
Vescovo's had a good session.
We are doing really well.
I'm going to say the state champion, two-way state champion, Neelyville High School girls, my alma mater. You take Lindbergh to 67 all the way to Arkansas. It's there. I think they won the 2A state championships. I think they won the week. And I'll say I want to thank Jim Gamble. I want to thank Ms. Stackhouse at the Jackson County Republican Club for having me. We had a great time. And we'll see you next week on This Week in Missouri Politics. If you enjoy the guests and the coverage on This Week in Missouri Politics, I want to invite you to come read the full story at Missouri Times. Go to MissouriTimes.com, your leading source for political news and information, available at MissouriTimes.com. This Week in Missouri Politics, brought to you by Spire and Sterling Bank.
Melanie's a good kid. I call her a kid. She's not a kid, but she's a kid to me. She is kind and complicated.
She's kind of a little quirky, but she has the greatest personality. She's always up to do things, wants to do fun stuff. So Melanie has Down syndrome. She has some definitely health issues. She has a speech impediment that makes it difficult for her to communicate. So a lot of things she has to maybe show you, or she has a hard time getting words out.
Yeah, where was this one taken? Is that your aunt's house?
She gets up and then she gets herself dressed. Puts her dirty clothes in the hamper. She's very self-sufficient that way. She comes into the kitchen and staff provide her medication for her and she takes it. And then staff prepares breakfast for her. We have her wipe off the table. She might need a prompt to do that, but she does that on her own. 3 days a week she goes to program for Easter seals, and she does a lot of activities throughout the day with that.
She is thriving with independence. being in this house, in this program. She's very happy to be here. This is her home. It's an amazing journey that has happened to her.
She says she'll visit her family, but she wants to come home. So she feels like this is her home, and there's nothing you can make better than for her to be like, this is my home. We're working on different things all the time, so it's a continuous work in progress. We're looking at having her learn her address and phone number. That's been difficult for her, just to memorize it. But we do repetition every day.
You want to go look for some DVDs?
Okay.
Okay.
I don't know where she'd be if there wasn't for Easter Seals. She would be probably having a less fulfilling life.
I'm very grateful to Easter Seals for the opportunity that she's been given. I've seen huge changes in her since she's been here to be on her own. And this is the best way that she can be on her own.
Where's your home? Here? Yeah. This is your home.
And I love this job. There's not a day that I don't want to not come here. And I know I'm making a difference. You can see that Melanie's happy, and that's probably our biggest goal, is we want our individuals to have rights and freedoms, and you can tell that she's very happy with that. She gets to live her life on her terms, and she's happy doing it.
Who's in this picture with you?
Daddy. She lost her dad about 4 years ago, and they were very tight. They were very close, and I'm sure he's smiling down right now.
We help people with disabilities be as independent as possible. We help them live out their life as full members of our community. People with disabilities want to do the same things you and I do. They want to work, they want to be valued, they want to have friends, and we help them achieve those goals.
We have to set priorities as a society, as a state, of what's important to us. And I think supporting individuals with disabilities is a really important thing for us to do. It's honoring the dignity of every human being and what their capabilities are and what their potential is, and allowing them to pursue whatever that is.
Many people with developmental disabilities need lifetime care. So we have a choice as a community. We can put them in institutions and nursing homes, which is expensive and inhumane, or we can help them live in the community and be as independent as possible. We can teach them the skills that maximizes their ability, whatever that is. That's good not only for the individual with a disability and their family, but it's good for the entire community.
That happiness that comes, that fulfillment, that dignity that people are allowed to have when we embrace the opportunities that are out there for people with disabilities is something that ripples across society. And so it obviously has an impact for that individual, but for their neighbor to see that individual working and having those interactions, and then that spreading across our state is an important thing. I think it should color how we view the world and what our priorities are.
The hope and opportunity that Easter Seals offers to people with disabilities would not be possible without the support of our community. Our donors, volunteers, neighborhoods that welcome people with disabilities, and our champions in Jefferson City make all of this possible.